Yeah, look, I get everything about passing patterns and pressing triggers and all of that, but for me, the other team just wanted it more, you know? Over this winter period, I sat down in front of the television and, like many others, watched an incredible amount of football. The hectic winter schedule in English football may well be problematic in terms of player welfare, but it is also unique, and with time off from work over the festive period, what better way to spend it than watching football? And over the past few months, there has been an ample number of ways to do that. The juggernaut that is Sky Sports were ever present with their broadcast of the Premier League, the Championship and the League Cup, but TNT Sports also had their fair share of Premier League fixtures, and relative new boys Amazon Prime had a slice of the winter action too. With so many games, even domestic TV could have a slice of the pie, with BBC and ITV both presenting FA Cup third round fixtures as standard. And whether the match was on a Saturday, a Sunday, a God knows what day in that week between Christmas and New Year's, and whether the match was a Premier League, Championship, FA Cup or League Cup fixture, and whether the match was on Sky Sports, TNT Sports, Amazon Prime, BBC or ITV, there was one absolute consistent factor that featured across all of them. Television, football punditry and pre and post-match analysis is embarrassingly awful across the board. Before I go any further and begin my criticism, let's start with some caveats. Football is the people's game, and not all people are the same. What one person may want to see from their pre and post-match presentations may well be different to what another person might. Football is both for the informed and the uninformed, those who consider themselves intellectuals and enjoy thinking deeply about the game, and those who will claim that doing so is everything wrong with the sport in the modern day. Football is for the devoted who watch every game every week. Football is for the casual who will tune in for the big fixture, and football is for everyone in between. However you choose to present the game will always be a balancing act with these factors in mind, and riding a line between nuanced and digestible, or serious and silly, is by no means an easy feat. Nevertheless, football punditry in the modern day in the UK is the absolute piss that somehow manages to please no singular audience while simultaneously disappointing all of them. It's seemingly universal, and I can't be the only one who is absolutely tired of the same old faces slumped over in their chairs like it's a burden for them to be there. Whether it's Roy Keane, Jamie Redknapp, Michael Owen, Patrice Evra, Graham Souness, or literally anyone else, it's all mostly the same shade of apathy towards being paid to watch the biggest and best football games in the world and having a platform to speak about them on live television. Despite almost all of the familiar faces who appear pre and post-match on UK television being former elite professionals, none of them really bring anything interesting to the discussion or seemingly have anything new to say. You could take any one of the names I've already mentioned, or any other name who I may have missed, and predict exactly what they're going to say about any situation. You could mute the television at full time and, like a bad ventriloquist, make up your own words to the mouths moving on the screen, and you probably wouldn't be far off. Owen and Redknapp will give some absolute bottom of the barrel level observations about the events of the game. Patrice Evra will mention his time under Alex Ferguson at Manchester United and then say something vaguely problematic. Roy Keane will complain that there wasn't enough leaders or passion or character out there tonight, and if he was playing, he would have kicked a few of them to show them who's boss. Micah Richards, who at least escapes my previous criticism of seeming like they don't want to be there, will course correct too much the other way and belt something about Big Meeks, followed by his trademark loud belly laugh. These names are former elites of the game with unrivaled experiences in top-level football, and yet They are totally flanderised when in front of the camera and talking about the sport, and may as well just be walking catchphrase machines. A lot of criticism gets directed to the odd new face we may see on our television screens in the world of football punditry, unfortunately mostly aimed at women, and yet Jamie Redknapp has been a pundit for years and has made a career out of saying he can play a bit, he's top quality, I felt like they were just lacking desire, and other hollow football cliches we've all heard a million times over. It can sometimes be hard to forget given the way he speaks, but even Redknapp himself was a top 1% footballer, playing 237 times for Liverpool and 17 times for his country. Redknapp knows more about kicking a football than I and everyone who will watch this will ever know combined. But you'd never guess it with the way he talks about whichever match he's designated to analyse. And this sentiment relates even more so to Keane, Owen, Evra and the like, who are literally living legends of the game. I want to pause for a minute here, and I'd like to put things another way. Imagine you were told that next week you would be covering the pre-match and post-match analysis for Manchester United's Premier League fixture at home to Spurs. You're tasked with talking about the game on a national television station which will be watched by millions around the world. After an initial feeling of panic, you'd be unbelievably excited for the privilege. You'd probably hunker down and do some extensive research. How have the teams played in and out of possession this season? How could they change it up for this game? How will Ten Hag's and Postecoglou's styles clash? And how can we predict where the game will be won and lost? Will Spurs press on the front foot as they have been at home, or will they sit back and allow a nervy Old Trafford to get the best of the home team as they wait to spring a counter-attack? What about Onana's situation with his form and him heading to AFCON late? What about new arrival Timo Werner replacing Son, who's departed for the Asia Cup? How can you help the viewer, whether casual or dedicated, feel excited and informed about the prospect of the upcoming fixture, and how are you going to do it in a concise and interesting way? In reality, what we actually got was a pre-match slog with Roy Keane and Jamie Redknapp where nothing much of any value was said at all. After quickly running through some stats about United's awful attacking output this season, Roy Keane lamented that Rasmus Højlund simply needed some desire to score a goal. I wonder if Ten Hag has ever thought of that one. And when asked about Rashford's lack of goals this season compared to last, the first word out of Roy Keane's mouth was desire yet again. I wish I was making this up.
I go back to, you've got to have that real desire to put the ball in the back of the net. They go to Wigan during the week and obviously dominated League One team. They come away with 2 goals, a defender scores, then the second goal is obviously a penalty. These players have got that desire to score a goal.
Marcus Rashford was scoring goals for fun last season, just 3 so far this. What has to change for him?
Desire.
Marcus Rashford was sensational for Manchester United last season and scored 30 goals for club across all competitions. So what's caused this downturn in goal scoring form? Is he receiving the ball in the same areas? Is he having to drop too deep? Or this season has Ten Hag asked him to receive in wider areas away from the goal? Has he always needed an overlapping left back to help him create space? And if so, has Luke Shaw's injury troubles this season affected him? And if so, how much? Is he better on the left or on the right or down the middle? He's played in all 3 of these positions this season. Is his lack of goals this season due to him missing chances he wouldn't have missed last season? Or is he simply not getting as many chances despite finishing them at the same rate? I don't know the answer to any of these questions, but a deep dive, some analysis, or even just an opinion into any one of them is surely more interesting than saying that a man who has risen from boyhood fan to main man at one of the biggest clubs in the world simply lacks desire and work rate. Redknapp fares no better, telling us that Van der Ven has tremendous pace, has great pace, and is happy to get in a foot race with anybody. And also, Timo Werner has, quote, unbelievable pace. Insightful stuff.
Revelation when he first signed. He's got tremendous pace. He enables you to play that high line that Ange Postecoglou wants to do. He's got great pace. He's comfortable on the ball. He's happy to get in a foot race with anybody. But Werner's got unbelievable pace.
Not to suggest that desire and pace aren't important attributes for a professional footballer to have, but with the way these two both spoke before a very interesting and potentially tactically complex Man United v Spurs fixture, they make it seem like they're the only attributes. I've picked on these two here as an example, and maybe unfairly so, given that watching any football coverage across any broadcaster and on any platform will yield basically the same level of intellectual redundancy. With possibly one exception, which we'll touch upon later, it's not like this is a Sky Sports problem and that Amazon or TNT Sports or the BBC are putting on stellar analysis elsewhere. It's all roughly the same level of footballing cliches, surface level observations and boring time wasting. You know, maybe it's not like this is even a Roy Keane problem. Although he's definitely one of the worst defenders in my eyes, practically every pundit sinks to the low standards of the ones before them. And, as I've already said, most of them are some of the most brilliant and highly respected players to ever play the game. Which leads me on to thinking about what the root cause actually is, and it makes me beg the question, is this simply how the broadcasters want the pundits to behave? Maybe it's less down to the quality of the pundit or the lack of dedication they may have for punditry, but more so down to the fact that this is what the broadcasters want, and this is what the broadcasters think the average viewer wants. As already mentioned, the type of viewer who could be tuning into the big football match varies wildly, and maybe this dumbed down analysis is simply catering to the lowest common denominator. It would explain how nothing changes from game to game or season to season. It would explain how every pundit practically acts the same way, thinks the same way, and talks the same way. It would explain why we keep seeing the same familiar faces touting the same phrases every week, like they're returning characters on a sitcom. Rather than Joey Tribbiani asking, "How you doing?" Roy Keane will get angry and start ranting about leadership and character. Souness will argue that Pogba once again simply hasn't done enough, and Micah Richards will crack a joke about a fellow pundit and then belly laugh. Maybe this is all by design. You know, I, as someone that runs a YouTube channel dedicated to balanced and informative football discussion, would obviously love a pre-match show full of statistics, tactical analysis, and all manner of wankery regarding footballing philosophy, biomechanics, and a 40-minute piece on why short corner kicks are better, actually. But that's just me. Maybe the general audience simply doesn't want that, and the broadcasters feel that anything close to that will put people off. The match is the match, and what happens on the pitch during the 90 is what actually matters. The pre and post show are just there to settle you in, see a familiar face or two, and don't overthink too much. Last season's Champions League featured a tasty Milan derby in one half of the competition's semi-finals. In a very rare occurrence for the competition, Milan and Inter found themselves drawn against each other in the double-header to decide who would make it to the Champions League final. These teams had only faced each other twice before in this competition, with the last meeting being all the way back in 2005. Two big, historic, iconic teams battling it out in an intense rivalry in the semi-final of the biggest and best competition European football has to offer. This sort of occurrence is a fantastic proposition for fans and must be an absolute dream scenario for the broadcasters. TNT Sports, known as BT Sports back at the time, had hit the jackpot not just once with the fixture, but twice, as they already had the rights to broadcast Serie A games and already had specialist Serie A commentators and experts on their payroll. Respected Italian football experts James Richardson and James Horncastle were already on their books and were already presenting Italian football for BT Sports and covering Italian teams in the Champions League on BT Sports' Champions League Goals highlight show. Leg 1 of the Champions League semi-final featured Darren Fletcher as main commentator, with Ian Darke taking on that role for Leg 2, despite neither of them having ever covered a Serie A game for BT Sport that season. The first leg also saw Steve McManaman on co-commentary, and the second leg featured Glenn Hoddle. Both broadcasts were presented by Jake Humphrey, with Rio Ferdinand, Steven Gerrard, Peter Crouch and Michael Owen rounding out the punditry team in the studio. James Horncastle was relegated to a 3-minute chat at pitchside, and James Richardson was nowhere to be seen. An absolutely unique and brilliant opportunity for some proper football analysis that could have been provided by experts that BT Sports already had on their payroll was squandered to get the boys club in. These guys are not good pundits when talking about the English game that they all actually know, let alone Italian football. The coverage went just about how you'd expect, with a large part of the pre-match show featuring a conversation between Rio Ferdinand and Steven Gerrard regarding Fikayo Tomori's decision to leave Chelsea for Milan, which happened 3 years prior. Once again, the only conclusion I can really come to here is that this is what the broadcasters want, and this is what they think the audience wants. I've spent a lot of time giving out on this video about various pundits and their lack of suitability to create engaging and interesting football analysis, but maybe they're just simply not given the chance to by design. If you have Italian football experts already on your books and ready to use, and you're handed a Milan derby in a Champions League semi-final on a platter, why would you pick Rio Ferdinand? Part of me has to believe that there's an internet age viral element to it all. You see, Rio Ferdinand was part of the BT Sports punditry lineup for the Champions League when Cristiano Ronaldo equalised for Manchester United against Atalanta back in November 2021. Following the match, the BT Sport Twitter account posted a video of Ferdinand reacting to the goal as he jumped up from his chair and started shouting, "This is what he does!" To be fair to him, and this segment is not necessarily a criticism towards him, this seems like a genuine reaction, and he wasn't live on air when he did it, but importantly, the clip went viral online. If you're a football fan who spent any amount of time on the internet, you've seen it.
Oh my God! This is what he does! This is what he flipping does! It's illegal!
The clip on the official TNT Sports TikTok account has 5.1 million views at time of writing, and of course that doesn't count the millions upon millions of other views of the clip posted and remixed by different meme pages across the web. Yeah, we have some Italian football experts who know their stuff and can add some amazing insight, but if we get Rio back on, he might do another big shouty thing that gets us millions upon millions of eyeballs in free advertising. When you start viewing everything through this lens, it starts to explain everything. When Roy Keane gets angry about Manchester United and he sits there with that stern look on his face and goes off about why no one is kicking anyone like he would, the clips do big numbers on the internet. His criticisms and mannerisms are so exaggerated that I honestly have to believe that when Roy Keane is on television, he's not even Roy Keane anymore. He's simply a man playing a character known as Roy Keane. And, you know, it's worked. He's booked for all the big matches on Sky Sports, and he's on a lucrative podcast with Garry Neville and company, who even do big sellout live events. Yeah, look, we've got some analysts who can talk about Manchester United's build-up phase issues, but Roy's on the overlap, and we can goad him into saying something funny for our Twitter account. It can all just feel like a cycle of rage baiting for engagement. The broadcasters bait the pundit into doing something funny, the pundit plays up to it, everyone engages with it online, the broadcasters book the pundit again, and the cycle continues. As I've mentioned, I've been critical of many footballing legends here, but the people in charge of producing the shows are as bad, if not worse. Following the United vs Spurs game, Sky could have asked Keane about United's attacking patterns. They could have even prepped him on it weeks in advance. But instead they devoted a section of the post-match to talking about Rashford's celebration. Because It's Roy Keane, and he's the funny man who always rages about people celebrating. Quick, ask him about the Rashford celebration, he'll say something funny. It reminds me of that Simpsons episode where Bart becomes famous by using a new catchphrase, and all the kids in class look over to him in anticipation of him saying it.
I never thought I'd say this, but shouldn't we be learning something? Say the line!
Roy.
No energy, no desire. You're looking for your senior players to lead by example.
Ex-professional footballers, especially ones that have played at the highest levels of the game, have unrivaled experience and expertise that's incredibly hard to find. Don't get me wrong, Roy Keane has forgotten more about kicking a football than I could possibly ever hope to know. But what's missing here is an acknowledgement that being an expert in a subject matter and the ability to analyse, condense and then present that subject matter in an interesting and digestible way are two fundamentally different skill sets. Teaching is in itself a special skill that requires special attention, and the best teachers in the world aren't the ones who simply know the most about the subject that they're talking about. Yeah, you could argue that observations about the game coming straight from the mouths of some of the best players to ever play the sport adds weight and legitimacy to their words, but none of them are saying anything of any relevance anyway. Well, none of them, bar a couple of exceptions. Following Jamie Carragher's retirement from professional football and a couple years in the wilderness for Garry Neville as he was head coach of Valencia, Sky's Monday Night Football really came into its element in 2016, with both of them working on the show full time and David Jones joining as presenter. Finally, English television coverage of the Premier League has an intelligent, nuanced and worthy show to broadcast the most highly watched football product in the world. Monday Night Football avoids the trappings of almost all the examples I've labelled at others so far in this video. The pre-show is long enough to not only cover the big talking points from the wider Premier League that weekend, but to also analyse the two sides ahead of the game to come. The show does a good job to stray away from the low-hanging fruit football cliches and controversies, and instead, both pundits are given time and space to talk in depth about well-researched and rehearsed topics. For the first time, this doesn't simply feel like a series of ex-professionals who have just rocked up on the day to phone it in with their mates. There is a clear amount of work put into research well in advance of the show, with expected questions teed up by presenter David Jones and opinions from Jamie and Garry backed up by clear, concise and prepared video evidence. Both Jamie and Garry get a lot of stick from certain sections of practically every fan base in the Premier League, and I can't sit here and say that I agree with every opinion they've ever shared. But the point is that the show presents every opinion in such a clear, reasonable and evidence-based manner that it doesn't matter. The Monday Night Football boys do have a few clangers in them, and their takes can be especially blinded by their unwavering loyalties to their former clubs. But regardless, it's hard to describe just how much more engaging and interesting the football analysis is when they're willing to talk about something more than desire and pace. Both men are clearly backed by a team of researchers and maybe writers, but that doesn't change the fact that both men are also clearly committed and determined in producing the classiest and best football punditry show on English television. In regards to the punditry, they are simply leagues above every other ex-professional footballer on English television, and I think they know it too. When one of them is unavailable to do the show that week, normally Garry, the quality of the show in whoever substitutes in for him takes a drastic nosedive. One said week featured Roy Keane filling in for Garry as Jamie and Roy engage in a segment debating a combined Liverpool 2020 and Manchester United 1999 best 11. I hate these sorts of things, but it was worth watching to see Jamie systematically destroy Roy, who can't fathom the side not featuring Ryan Giggs, despite Jamie pointing out that Giggs only scored 4 Premier League goals in the 99 season. Keane is so rattled by his lack of preparation or evidence to back up his point that he ends up just like whimpering in the chair as Jamie stifles a laugh.
Does that 3 work then for you, as a 3 with Beckham tucked in there?
Yeah, but I'm just worried where we're going to fit the other United lads in. We've got Giggsy.
Giggs is not going in my team.
Oh, really?
No. It's... Well, I've got a front 3.
He just dropped that bombshell and moved on.
I love Ryan Giggs. I'm judging him on... Not judging him over his career, we're judging him on the 99 season.
Yeah.
Do you know how many goals he scored that season?
4.
Is that enough for you to get in that team?
No, but there's a bit of...
OK, let's get to my front 3.
And just to be clear, I think it's absolutely fine to think that 1999 era Ryan Giggs is better than 2020 Sadio Mane. I don't care, that's just an opinion. But the total lack of preparation or nuance in Keane's argument makes the lack of thought he's given it abundantly clear to see. The Monday night slot in the Premier League is often reserved for some of the biggest matches between some of the highest profile teams, and it's interesting that Sky Sports give these games such a long and well produced show, as it bucks my thesis earlier of broadcasters feeling that they have to pander to the lowest common denominator for the big games that attract the more casual viewer. Maybe it's just the simple fact that Monday nights only ever feature one Premier League fixture, allowing the pre and post-match show maximum preparation time and maximum time to breathe, but whatever it may be, Monday Night Football is a breath of fresh air in the footballing television landscape. As stated throughout this video, I'm aware that in-depth football analysis is simply not for everyone, but Monday Night Football proves that there's an audience for this and that it can be done in a way that audiences aren't tuning out to. In reality, I just don't even think I'm asking for that much. Monday Night Football is a simple show. Like, how hard is it really to employ people who know what they're talking about and who are prepared to do the work in preparation and research to present some small segments pre-match about a potentially interesting aspect of the upcoming game? You don't even have to make it the whole show. If you still insist we get a segment about Roy Keane not liking players for wearing gloves or something, go and grab some of the brilliant talent out there in football analytics and football writing and let them just do a segment or two to break things up. You could even pre-record it if you had to beforehand. I mean, just look at what the Tifo guys are doing and how immensely popular that YouTube channel is. The Tifo Football YouTube channel has 1.5 million subscribers. There is an audience for this, and all the evidence is staring us right in the face. Sky, TNT Sports, Amazon, and all the rest should, quite frankly, be embarrassed at being shown up by a bunch of YouTubers producing better football-related content than they are on 1/10 of the budget. And if you're still not convinced, just look at how sport is covered in other countries. US coverage of American football is consistently fun, interesting, and analytical. I mean, let's just look at something like College Game Day, a pre-match show that airs at 9 AM on a Saturday. I mean, look at this. Just look at the size of the live audience it's able to attract, because the people love it. Fuck, you don't even need to look abroad for inspiration. Just look at the way Sky Sports produces their cricket content. Nasser Hussein's short 5-minute segment about how getting rid of the umpire's call in Test match cricket would impact the game is leagues above anything any Sky pundit has ever done for football. I will leave a link in the description below. Please give it a watch, even if you don't like cricket, you'll be enticed. For now, we will have to settle for the bottom of the barrel analysis that we've already got, and that's a shame because the sport simply deserves more. Look, I don't want to overinflate the importance of the quality of a pre-match show for Brighton v Wolves or whatever, but I must maintain that getting to talk about football on live television in front of an audience of millions is not only a privilege that should be treated like one, but it's also important for the sport itself. Dedicated, balanced and intelligent analysis has the power to change the way the general public thinks about the game, and it has the power to elevate the sport, to change minds, and to attract a new generation of fans. I'm going off on a tangent here, but there's a lot of talk from a certain Real Madrid president about football losing its audience and a new generation being more interested in TikTok than the game. The solution proposed to fix this is a disgusting Super League that no one wants. But why is there never any thought given to the way the game is presented? Maybe a new generation of fans would find the sport that bit more interesting if the pre- and post-match shows weren't all comprised of disgruntled ex-professionals who don't want to be there, boringly ranting about the same meaningless topics or arguing over refereeing decisions. And failing all of this, forgetting everything I've said so far, can football punditry, at the very least, be fun? I would be remiss if I did not mention the American CBS coverage of the Champions League, featuring Thierry Henry, Micah Richards, Jamie Carragher, and presented by Kate Abdo. From what I've seen of the show, I'm not sure it totally satisfies my itch for in-depth analysis, but at least the guests are having fun and seem to enjoy being there, each other's company, and the privilege of covering the biggest games in football. It may not feature mind-bending analysis, but the pundits have chemistry and all bound off each other to create engaging and often very funny punditry. Clips of these four do big numbers on social media, with a regular array of commenters under every video asking why we don't get anything close to it on our domestic screens, and they have a point. The bar is on the floor regarding football coverage and punditry in the UK, and when considering the average cost a person must pay to watch all the games across 5 different services, it really has no right to be. We live in an age where your average football fan is perfectly accepting of previously thought of to be advanced metrics like expected goals, and can easily pull up Twitter or YouTube at any given moment and discover far more interesting analytic pieces from amateurs than they find on their television screens. We have evolved past the need for the boys' club to phone it in every week with terrible takes, grim attitudes, and repeated one-liners. Football can be so intricate, so interesting, and simply so fun to discuss. It's time television football punditry catches up. Okay, look, Roy, I'm sorry. If you see this, please don't break my legs.